You're strong.
I know.
It's okay. I've got you now.
Just like in the movies.
Welcome to Super Wonder Legacy. I am Jared. I'm here with Brit. What's up, Brit?
Hello, hello.
And today we are discussing. So one of the things that Brit and I always say is that the Superman Wonder Woman relationship, particularly the new 52 versions of these characters, are consistent with like the golden age like inspirations. But one of the things that we were talking about is okay, but when you think about it, the relationship itself between Superman and Wonder Woman, primarily romantic, but even if it's just like friends, aligns with either the writer's intentions or the themes of their run. So we're going to talk about that.
Exactly. I mean, you have these two inspirational characters, and honestly, currently, they aren't so inspirational, at least to me.
Particularly, well, one of them is written by Tom King, the least inspirational writer.
Right. And then the other, I mean, the Superman, run right now by Williamson, it is very middle road. You know, he's already said that he doesn't take too kindly to controversy. So he wants to basically write fluff.
And
And he
remember,
is,
it's like even in the Dan Slott book, it's so cringe. And honestly, Britt, I knew this was going to happen
yes, it's
when he was put on the book, because I read his Marvel work and I go, oh God. But
it's
he's actually known as writing one of the worst Iron Man stories of all time.
wow. Well, I mean, Superman is now just full on post-crisis version. It's no room for anything else. It's very basic of
Mm-hmm.
the 90s. Superman is basically stuck in the 90s. And yeah, Slott's book, it was basically the first issue was basically like a recap of post-crisis. That's all it was. And honestly,
Adding
if
John.
yeah, adding John. But honestly, it's kind of like those recaps, unless you, I mean, the fact that you are continuing on with the whole Batman was right thing with the only time Superman was basically relevant or, is when he was dead. That becomes more and more true when you have the only reference or the impactful reference for Superman is Death of Superman.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. I'm like, that's when he sold the best.
and it's like the only reason why it even sold was because it was a hype of, oh, you're gonna kill off Superman, and it was a gimmick. It was,
And it was a slow news day. That's the only reason why CNN got on
yeah.
it.
And then what happened? Because you, 6 months later, he comes back, and you almost crash the.
You did. Well. Here's the other thing. You know what that did? That whole storyline, Death and Return. That is when death and death in comics meant zero, because at that point, up to that point, if someone died in a comic, for the most part, unless you saw a body, unless there was no body, they were dead. Like Gwen Stacy, Uncle Ben, Bucky Barnes, and Jason Todd. We all know how that turned out.
Right, but you also see where the edginess comes from too. You know, a lot of especially with Jurgens, the revisionist history of, oh, post-crisis Superman, he was just this happy-go-lucky family man, and everything was basically peachy for him or whatever. But again, this is the start of Jerkins is basically like at the scene of every crime for Superman. He was the
Him and
start.
Byrne. And
Yes.
and we all know one crime he's at the scene for.
Um, he was the first to have the whole if Lois dies, Superman turns into a dictator. Um, he was, well, killing Superman and thinking that that was his only significance of the marriage, you know. And then you have John and the night, just the whole butterfly domino effect of edginess and darkness of the 90s was because of Death of Superman. So yeah, that whole thing, for comics to be so stagnant and still stuck in that 90s mindset, or even the early 2000s, it was some good, but then it was mostly, you know,
Well, let me put
when
it
you
this way.
actually.
It
Mhm.
was good for characters other than Superman and Wonder Woman. Well,
Right.
Wonder Woman, I think she had less of, I mean, compared to Superman, I think Wonder Woman's post-crisis time was less rough because that's when, like, she didn't have a main love interest or anything like that. It wasn't like it is now. But it's like, it was still meh at worst.
Yes, she didn't have a main love interest, but the love interest that they tried to give her were
I
terrible.
mean, you don't like Nemesis? How when he landed on Black Canary, he went, "Oh, you're a soft landing."
Terrible.
And
And
that was an Amazon's attack, Brit.
it,
I
it
have to reference that all the time just to see her
why?
reaction.
Why?
I love you, Brit. But anyway, so continuing on with this. So here's the thing. So again, we're talking about why the relationship like really aligns with the original intentions. Now, who are the creators of Superman and Wonder Woman? For those of you that live under a rock, Superman was written by Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, two Jewish immigrants from, were they from New York? I don't think so.
You know what? Let's look that up right quick.
The point is, so they created Superman, and the bulletproof thing that came from the fact that one of them, I forget which one, his father was killed in like to gun violence. So of course he would want to create like this father figure that was invulnerable to bullets and stuff. And the whole Clark Kent thing came
Ohio.
Ohio. So the whole Clark Kent thing came from the fact that that people always look down on them. So they said, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if I was this great hero, but all a bit beneath this meek exterior?" So that's kind of where that comes from. With Wonder Woman, it gets a little complicated. So Marston, so he had been the first critic of the comic book industry, and he decried the blood curdling masculinity of the comic book industry. So DC hired him, and then so the story goes, if the movie is to be taken seriously, which there are some ways it is, some ways it's very much not, was that he went to DC and proposed this character named Suprema the Wonder Woman. And up to this point, female superheroes weren't like a thing. Like, unless they were like accessories to the male characters, as Britt and I will see when we inevitably do Sue Storm and Reed Richards. But this was the first time that like a female superhero got her own thing, and it sold really well.
Right. You have, okay, so with Superman, you, and as per the DC documentary that we always reference, he
It's
is
so good.
a he is the ultimate immigrant story, but also a power fantasy as an individual. No, it is not just of the pairing. It was never the pairing. Honestly, any superhero pairing is a power fantasy. So any detractors, you know, yeah, that's what that is. So,
Including Batman.
right, Batman is basically like the ultimate power
Mm-hmm.
fantasy. Um, but Superman also represented like basically the nerd guy that never got the popular girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so Superman was also created as like this, you know, you I think it was either a Tumblr quote or something like that, but it was, you walk past Clark Kent every day or something
Mm-hmm.
looking for Superman when Clark Kent is Superman, you know.
Yeah, because that's part of the genius of the Clark Kent persona. No one would expect Superman to be this meek guy.
Right. So,
Meek does not mean galoot, by the way.
right. So it that is true, but the way the fans have twisted that to be so obnoxious in a way,
Oh, Britt, I wanted
especially
to tell you this. I challenged someone on that when I said, by the way, even like Chris Reeves didn't want that to do the like bumbling Clark Kent, and they go, yeah, and that's why 3 and 4 flop.
right. No, that was not
There were
why
a
three and
lot of
four.
reasons why those two movies flopped.
Exactly. It was not just because of his identity, the whole thing like that. It was because, yeah, like you said, a lot going on with that. But yeah, the character he's supposed to represent not just that either, because now fans have twisted it to, oh, the nerd guy gets the popular girl, or the nerd guy is chasing after the popular girl. She gives him a chance, and she's this girl boss type thing. No, that was not who the character is supposed to represent. And and that truly has overshadowed the important thing of Superman being an immigrant story. Even, I mean, his immigrant roots have been basically demonized to where it's the Clark Kent is who I am, Superman is what I can do, and basically Kal-El is like non-existent. You and because the character has been so far removed from the original roots, of that aspect of the story, when you get iterations like New 52, it seems so jarring for the for for some of the fans. And it's like, no, we keep having to reference this and say this, that New 52 was a modern version of the Golden Age.
Yep.
And it's kind of like these fans are also so soft and sensitive that they don't understand. Okay, you think that, you know, a New 52 version was rough. Go read The Golden Age, and he, like, no nonsense, very rough around the
He
edges.
threw someone off a building.
Yes, so, that whole thing, it's all about reading, which I know
That's
some
so hard,
hard,
Brit. Oh
exactly.
my god! And I say this as someone that reads 30 comic books a month.
And with Wonder Woman, yes, her name was to be Suprema. It was changed because it was too close to Superman. What Marston wanted was a equal counterpart to Superman. He wanted that female representation, and that girls can be their own heroes. You don't have to rely on a man to save you. And the
Which is
thing is,
hilarious when in his run, Wonder Woman gets tied up a lot.
well, that was his,
I go, I don't want a Wonder Woman to be like rescued by the man a lot. Proceeds to have Wonder Woman be tied up and rescued by men a lot.
it was a difficult time for
I,
Marston.
I love how Brick goes, it was a difficult time.
The concept of wanting her to be kind of like liberated, and for her to represent, liberation, and basically being, it was celebrating and being in tune with sensuality, and just being yourself. And I think that Marston did go a little bit too far on that, and
Yeah,
kind of,
when you look into the guy, he wasn't this strict like feminist as people think he is.
yeah. So, but the original intent of feminism has always been, just because it is about women basically being equal to men, and having that respect. And yeah, you can be your own hero as a female, but that doesn't mean you just cut off men, period. That's not
Yeah,
what that means. It means basically working together and being equals. And like I said, having respect.
yeah,
And that
exactly.
is what, to why we are having this conversation now, is basically showing that Clark and Diana's relationship, whether it is romantic or platonic, that just that dynamic is about that. Is about keeping in line with their true intentions. Clark is more in tune with his immigrant roots. Diana is more, you know, she's more respected, and she is the equal to Superman as she is supposed to be. I would say that with the Trinity concept, I, I'm not too keen on it anymore. Well, I
Me
never
too,
have been.
particularly when I find out how fake it is.
Exactly. However, the true intent of it, and we've talked about that, was that Clark, of course, was supposed to represent the father, Diana the mother, um, and
Does that
Bruce.
make Bruce their emo kid?
Well, he's not supposed to be that childish, a man child. He's supposed to be like the emo uncle.
Which is hilarious. Where it's good that we have this slide with Wonder Woman 800 stuff, because in the Wonder Woman 800 for Batman, he's a kid,
Yeah, that was, I mean, like, if you see that and think of that as like a Wonder Bat moment, as romantic,
and that's the problem. Or if you
that's
look at
very
this
much a problem.
moment and think, "Oh yeah, it's very platonic." What? What? Look at the way
No
he's
way.
holding her in the third page.
Right. So, yeah, like you said, the Trinity aspect dynamic is very fake. However, the intent of it was, especially with Kingdom Come, Diana was elevated to be this equal to both, Clark and Bruce, but mainly of Clark. Again, as I said, he is to be the father, Diana is to be the mother, and they are to be the mother and father of the superhero genre at large. But it seems that with DC, of course, they can't handle a strong female character who can't be pushed to the background. You had Tomasi say that she was intimidating because she demanded the spotlight. It's kind of like, well, yeah, that is what she's supposed to do. She is supposed to bring the challenge to the male's perspective, to the male character. But when you take that away, you diminish her character and you diminish her purpose. So, it's like, why we never want Wonder Woman to be pushed to the background or for her to be shelved. But at the same time, it's like, if you are going to continue to disrespect her and use her as a stepping stool or, something for other characters, especially for the world finest to treat her as a third wheel or, a mouthpiece for other ships and stuff. Honestly, it's kind of like to the point where it's like, please shelve her or something, or please like give her a break. We want her
And
to
as we
be
recently learned, they can legally do that.
we want her to have creators who love her, who understand that she isn't a mouthpiece. She isn't this character that basically you can have, live vicariously through. She isn't for shipping talk, whatever. She has her own purpose. And I feel like that purpose has completely been lost, especially, yeah, with her current run with King. It's like you had a good storyline, you know, Diana, Wonder Woman versus the military, the US government, or whatever. The Secret King thing, I mean, that's whatever. It's a little bit over dramatic or whatever, but it could have been something good. And especially when dealing with them, when you look at it as reality of trafficking and um, imprisoning and killing the Amazons, and what in reality how that has happened to a lot of immigrants. And Wonder Woman could have been that symbol of showing that this isn't right. That she could have, it could have been a story to show that, this, she's giving hope to the people of reality, to young girls or something like that. Instead, you change the story to be basically glorifying the military, glorifying this one male character, very bland male character. And just, again, you are taking away the female perspective of her, even with having her become a mother to this Cabbage Patch Chucky baby.
God damn it. I love the Cabbage Patch Chucky Baby line, by the way, and now more people have adopted that. So let's start with Superman. So obviously, as Britt and I've said many times, Superman was represented as the champion of the oppressed in many ways, just like the new 52 Superman like carried on that theme, and people didn't like it, which makes me think it's like, do you read Superman comics? Just saying.
Right. It's like, okay, as I just said, New 52 was back to the basics, the original. When Dan DiDio, when they were going to launching Rebirth, he was saying that basically post crisis was back to basics. I was like, no, 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 no.
That is very not back to basics.
No, that's no. This Superman, and the first thing that we see is that he's standing on the moon, of course, by the American flag. That he is basically the fact that Rebirth was an apology for New 52.
Like, no, legit, it was an apology. Like, they legit apologized for it, and I go, shut up.
And you apologize for Superman basically calling crooked businessmen rats, which they are. But you have the Rebirth Superman basically, shaking hands with businessmen, shaking hands with, government officials and stuff like that, and taking pictures and stuff. So, yeah, you can definitely see that transition to be more comforting to basically a corrupted world, that you have conformed to accepting the corruption instead of fighting against it. And that is basically what Superman is the poster boy for, that he is supposed to be neutral when obviously he's supposed to be fighting for what's right. And that is also what Wonder Woman is supposed to be or represents too. But no, we don't have that. Both of these characters that are supposed to be inspirational, aspirational, and that are supposed to fight oppression, that is supposed to be, these representation of diversity, they're not. Currently they are very much these poster characters for the corrupted view of, what's accepted in society, and how you have to basically disregard your heritage, disregard just your belief. You have, especially the latest issue of King with Wonder Woman, to say that she loves Steve more than Earth.
Yeah, that's again, Britt, what's the phrasing that Superman and Wonder Woman have?
Yes, when the worlds come first.
Thank you.
And if they forget that, basically their relationship is over, because they will put the world first.
Also, Britt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeing here a very important question. Should Superman marry Lois Lane? We all know the answer to that is perpetually no.
Right.
But it's nice to see that Jerry Siegel, I wonder who that is, also said in all caps with an exclamation point after it, no!
Yes, so he said no. This is basically the imaginary stories, which is adequate continuity stories. It's fine there, but main continuity and stuff like that, no. It just wasn't supposed to be a thing, and especially because it's limiting the character. I can't stand when fans say, "Oh, they need to be in their own separate worlds," or how if Clark and Diana are together, they are limiting their worlds. Or
well, again, it goes back to what Comic Storian and I, RIP, talked about when he came on my show. He said the problem with like superheroes dating non-superhero people, and it's the same thing with Steve, that's like you just said, Britt, that severely limits the stories that you can tell. Whereas opposed to when you get to like Power Couple by Charles Sewell, or even Batman Catwoman, not written by Tom King, which or Green Lantern, Star Sapphire, name any superhero power couple. What that leads to is that you can see there, because What's interesting that I have noticed, because one of the things that I am a nerd about in addition to comic books is military history, and one of the things I read a lot is that you can tell a lot about a relationship if it's tried by battle. And look at what Power Couple showed. That's true.
I mean, the tagline is "Love is a battlefield,"
Yeah,
like
exactly.
literally. And the fact that how their relationship is framed is that it's not oh, we know we're going to be together at the end. You know, is this looming question of, can we make it to the end? But you have the traditional relationships where it's like it has to be that even the conflict that they try to give them, it has to be basically wrapped up. you know
Or
and
or it's like, again, this is one of my problems with Superman being with Lois. Ultimately, we're with Diana. Diana encourages him to embrace every part of who he is, all the facets of who he is, and this is what Diana does with people. Despite what people will tell you, she doesn't encourage him to abandon his like Clark Kent side. Anyone that tells you that doesn't know what they're talking about on the subject. But Lois, ultimately, that relationship, whether intentionally or unintentionally, she encourages him to distance himself from his Kryptonian side.
right, and it's the whole, again, Clark it Clark Kent is who I am, Superman is what I can do,
Mhm.
and additionally, Kal-El is non-existent. You don't see where Lois is advocating for Krypton, or she's interested in learning about Krypton. She doesn't even call him by his birth name. As a reminder, Diana, she calls him both. Yes, she calls him Cal out of honor and being respectful to his culture, but that doesn't mean that she doesn't call him Clark. She still calls him Clark.
She calls him
And
Clark all the time. That's the problem when people say she never calls him Clark. And I go, you don't read comics then.
quite honestly, to me, with her just majority of the time calling him Clark, it feels funny. Like it feels unnatural for her.
Well, here's the thing. She just picks the most appropriate time for that. Because obviously, if he's like with his coworkers and she walks in, she's not going to say, "Hey, Kal-El."
True. I mean, you're right. You have moments where, of course, she's not going to call him Cal, in front of the Daily Planet or anything like that. But it just feels like, especially in the, let me see, it is DC Presents 32, where they were under the spell from Arrows, and Diana calls him Cal. And when she calls him that, Clark says, oh, like you're calling me by my Kryptonian name, then it's becoming serious, like it's getting personal. So obviously, if you know his Kryptonian name, that means that you have a deep connection with him, because that is a part of him that is so obviously secretive, and that is who he was during pre-crisis. Um, but now, if you call him, Cal, then it's a distance. It's like you don't know who he really is, and it's only just Clark. And I just think that whole backwards thing it's not working for me. You know, it's the same thing as saying that Superman is a mask. Like that does not
It's
make sense to me
not.
at all.
It's
It
it's a Batman fan talking about that, because it's kind of funny with Batman. It's in the reverse, because you could argue Bruce Wayne is the mask.
Yeah, I mean, especially with him, it's always going to be Bruce Wayne also died in the alley,
Hmm.
you know. So that works for him. But Clark, I would say that, well, because of post-crisis, and Byrne aiding him up to knowing of Krypton when he's what, 18 or something, instead of him growing up to know his own roots. That takes so much away from the character. Um, I mean, even with having the Kents, they weren't the original in the original story.
Yeah, he was
Superman,
adopted.
he was adopted. He was in an orphanage. He the motorcyclist and stuff like that. So it's like with the kids dying in New 52, that goes back to the golden age. It's certain aspects of New 52 that you can align perfectly with the golden age.
And on that, yeah, it's because, well, for one thing, and not only that, but I love that the goal is because what we did for Superman Days, we actually dramatically read Action Comics 1, and straight up, Action Comics 1, he is like grabbing people, he's like throwing people off a building to interrogate them. So I'm
Right.
like, oh my God, and I'm like, people forget about like even the post-crisis fans, Brit, when they talk about how the Superman was so edgy. Did you know the post-crisis Superman, when he was confronting an abusive father, shot a gun at him, obviously caught the bullets, and basically threatened him?
That
was post-crisis.
that
At least
story
I think.
was it Secret Identity?
I think it was either that or it might have been in Birthright. The point is, it was in post-crisis, and I'm like, how about that? By these people, they treat Superman so much like he's like all puppies and rainbows.
Because they are writing him as that, especially with my adventures of Superman with Superman, and I mean, the way Twitter fans talk about Superman, even absolute Superman. I saw a fan art of him like being this fluff bunny or something.
Is it because of the
And
long hair?
yeah, and he like being this shy, while compared to Batman, Batman is all this rough, tough,
Why do Twitter fans always ruin everything?
and also Superman is supposed to be like the sunshine, while Batman is the dark, edgy one. So, just that superficial stuff is very irritating, and it just ruins the character. It definitely does. Um, so when you have New 52 Superman, this is where fans say, oh, he's trying to be like Batman. No, Batman is trying to be like Golden Age Superman, actually.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of Batman, real quick, did you see that Scott Snyder met his first absolute Batman cosplayer?
Really?
He's in an extreme muscle suit with an axe.
Wow. Well, I mean, that is good for Snyder.
That definitely works. But I mean, see, here's the thing. And it's like, this is one of the things that I really love about Absolute Superman. And it's why a lot of traditional Superman fans have jumped off the book. I'm seeing a lot of this Superman in there. That's the reason why I essentially label the Absolute Universe as the new 52, because it's essentially, when you think about it, a lot of those, it's the new 52 so far without the bad decisions of the new 52. And I think that's why it's being so embraced by the fan base.
Yeah, and also because it's, in Elseworld.
And it's not Tom
instead
King.
of well, yeah, and I would still say that again, New 52 gets ragged on a lot for, yeah, there were some bad decisions, but at the same time, it's so much of the pressure that
Well,
DC
it
had,
saved the company, so
exactly. And so it's like fans want to emphasize on the bad. And yeah, you know, but at the same time, it was so tedious. And it was the reason why New 52 just really couldn't reach the potential, especially when you have writers who, again, are so
directly
stuck in that.
undermined it, like Jurgens, who straight up, from what I heard, said he didn't want to write Superman like the new 52 Superman. That's why. And then here's the problem. If there's something fans don't like about a particular version of a character, they then condemn the entire damn thing.
And it's ridiculous because, I mean, honestly, Jurgens' iteration of Superman is not good, and it's not even
It's boring.
very boring, and it just the whole thing, especially with Rebirth, is so mean spirited. And with Superman, it just feels like that is the only thing that you can reference is him dying. It's like, okay, do you want a cookie for doing this
Because you
story?
know why? Again, that was the story that made Jurgens relevant. So he always has to reference it every damn time. It's why. And by the way, I will say this, but more people are starting to realize that that's all that Jurgens does.
I mean, people have been knowing, um, when he was writing, I think Batman Beyond and other books, and the fact that the books they couldn't even reach top 50. They
That's
debuted
what people
so
have to
low.
realize. You can like Jurgens' writing. I'm not saying you can't like him, because there's some stuff of Peter J. Tomasi I like. It's called Green Lantern, but it's essentially like, look, let's divorce ourselves from the comic book fan. These guys don't bring the sales that they used to, or ever, or really they never did. But let me put it this way: at the very least, they don't bring in the sales like they used to, because they keep writing characters like they were in like the 80s and 70s. And guess what? Today's audiences isn't jumping on that, because you know what's interesting, Britt? When you write the characters like this version of Superman the New 52 in the Absolute Universe, look what happens to sales.
Right. But again, you have fans that are so sensitive
Selfish.
now. Selfish and sensitive,
Yep.
where you can't have the characters challenged though. That is the thing. These
Because it makes
characters,
them think. They want to go through life just go. Essentially, they want to be sheep. That's what they want to be.
yeah. And you want these characters to be the power fan, fantasies. These, basically everything is so easy and given on a silver platter without, like, basically what Tomasi said was saying, no conflict, no story, but the way that he did it was so contrived, and it was, again, the whole mean spirited type thing of purposely dismantling and this dynamic that was actually, again, aligning with the characters, and obviously had so much positive backing with it with Sewell. But when he was able to write Rebirth, we see how he wanted to write this happy-go-lucky family dynamic, that even with the consequence of Reborn, or um, what was that, when they were on Apocalypse, and you have Lois um, fighting the Furies, or her in a Hellbat suit, things like that. Where's the conflict in that? Where's the actual stakes when you are jumping the
Plus, it
shark?
doesn't make sense that Lois can use the Hellbat suit. I've always maintained that. That is up until the level of, so Tomasi really likes Lois, so he's putting her in situations that realistically she shouldn't be in. Because there's no way Batman would teach Lois how to use the Hellbat suit.
That's true,
But
but
that would require logic. You know what's kind of funny? It doesn't make sense because he wrote Batman and Robin.
yeah, but Tomasi, what I'm saying, what I'm basically saying is that these writers and are very wishy-washy, and so are the fans. Like I said, they're very sensitive, and you can't truly change anything. You can't challenge these characters. You can't challenge even the fans themselves to think more deeply. Um, and that is what Superman is supposed to represent, though. He is supposed to bring that sort of awareness and to have you think deeper. They some of these fans want to pick and choose when they talk about the OG creators to say, oh, they were two Jewish boys, and but you don't respect them though. You
Yeah,
don't respect their
exactly.
story, because if you respected their story, you wouldn't be griping about when Superman is representing the immigrant story. That whole logic thing, you can't pick and choose. You have to, if you want the true story of Superman, you have to accept that aspect of the
The full
character.
story. You can't leave out parts because it's inconvenient. Speaking of inconvenience, so we get to Wonder Woman. Now, so again, it's like, okay, so here's the thing. When you look at Wonder Woman, she's one of those characters that has a very complicated origin, both in and off the page. But first off, as Brit had said, when he created Wonder Woman, Marston said a woman's strong qualities have become despised because of their weakness. The obvious remedy is to create a feminine character with all the strength of Superman, plus all the allure of a good and beautiful woman. Hence, Diana.
Yeah, and what this it was more to the quote, but it was about like women being shameful of their femininity. And it's like, no, you be confident in yourself. Be confident in who you are, what you look like. It doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your skin tone, doesn't matter you know, your height or whatever like that. It does not matter. Women are to love themselves, you know, and Diana and the Amazons are supposed to represent every woman and also demanding the respect from their male counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, as you said earlier, Wonder Woman's origin and some of the things are very
If you want to talk about revisionist history,
it is very questionable. Um, yeah, it's something that we do want to ignore in 2025, because that
there are
is
certain
something that,
parts you just cannot do today.
yeah, it's like, wow, what were you thinking? You certainly wasn't thinking with your head. Um, but with Wonder Woman, she's just supposed to make you, or as a woman, just feel so accomplished, validated, vindicated, and just, as I said, loved, and and it's something that women now want. You want that respect. You want your voice to be heard. You want to be taken serious. Um, and that doesn't mean that men just can't be around or men have to be lower or anything like that. It is about equal balance. And the fact that even Tom King, run to have Hippolyta say that men needs to be that black and white sort of statement saying that men need to be they can only be above you or below you, but everything like basically in between is just play. That's basically saying that you can't be equals, and that is not Wonder Woman's message at all.
He's essentially taking the extreme feminist approach when it comes to this, like men are only objects meant for pleasure or something like that. And I go, that is not Wonder Woman, or even that is not Hippolyta at all.
Right. And the thing with that, this is why I would say that even with advocating for women to write Wonder Woman, you have writers like Gail Simone, who has written problematic things, Tom Treasure, the Wonder Woman 2009 movie, where you would honestly think that a man did write that, you know, those certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
exactly.
no, it's not about the gender, whatever, of the writer. It's not about that. It is about having respect for the character, just in general, and having the love for the character, and also the understanding of the character. And again, Wonder Woman's message, feminism has changed throughout the decades. You have radical feminism. You have where women do have that sort of attitude that basically men aren't sugar honey iced tea, and they should be at the bottom, you know
Mm-hmm.
um, that they do certain have that sort of mentality that Tom King wrote Hippolyta with, but that is not Diana's message. Diana is supposed to be the standout, and again, her fight is for equality of everyone. Yes, she does represent women and children. That is, her main focus, I would say, but it's still men are included too, especially innocent men.
Exactly. But it's like the idea that men can play any role in Wonder Woman books because Tom King screwed the pooch when it comes to Steve Trevor. I think that I get why people are upset with that, and trust me, I agree with you. But I think it's a little bit of an overcorrection, don't you think?
Yeah, is what you want. Again, you want a writer, it doesn't matter gender, that can give you that type of story that shows, again, equal respect. And also, yeah, the current run is definitely what Tom King said is he's trying to he talks out his backside, as we know, because he
No.
certainly because he certainly isn't, giving respect to past writers, especially Perez. But
If
with
anything, he's disrespecting Perez.
right, Golden Age Wonder Woman, Steve was the love interest. However, when Steve was written, he was trying to get Diana to marry him, basically stop being Wonder Woman. And she says, yeah, I'll marry you. Basically, when evil is completely like when the fight is over, basically. So that essentially means never because evil is always there, always fighting and
It's
stuff like
even
that.
that's the way Nolan's Batman ended the first movie, where it's like, if there's ever a day when Gotham no longer needs me, we can be together.
Right. And that was also Diana and Steve in the Crisis movies until he kicked the bucket.
Yay!
But Diana's relationship, with Clark, going with that, it's never about marriage or anything. It's never about, that traditional way of settling down or, things like that. Their relationship is always focused on, two people who understand the fight for freedom, the fight for innocence, to be safe. And that love that they have, yeah, is the love for each other, but it's also what makes their love so genuine and so much, much more powerful and inspirational, much better than the traditional relationships, is that they, as we said, they put the world first. Their love is for their love for each other comes from their love for the world,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't put one person over that. Tom King. Um, so yeah, when you have detractors, especially some Wonder Woman fans, say that Diana is reduced when she's with Clark. No, that is never the case in the story, or I would say the concept of their relationship. It's never about the reduction, or she's never reduced. It is always a writer who has a hidden agenda, mostly, trying to basically pull the rug from under the ship, as because they have this biasness for the traditional relationships. We saw that firsthand in Rebirth and the animated DC AMU verse. You have this relationship that was building, that was had such innocence and purity to it, that was genuine, and then not only break them up off screen, but you also have them turn antagonistic. You have Diana as a mouthpiece. You have her feelings for Clark. They are You turn them very shallow. That she has an interest in the Eradicator for some reason. Um, and also in when transitioning to Rebirth or within Rebirth, you have her say that she's not good with romance and in love, and that her relationship was easy and stuff like that. No, that's not how you write Diana. That takes away her genuine love. And it's not just romantic love, it's just love for her best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Their relationship is a solid foundation of friendship first. that's pretty much why.
Friendship. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty much why we love their relationship, because of that foundation. And in reality, that building a friendship first in any relationship makes it last so much longer.
Exactly. So the other thing I want to talk about is that with Marston's view on visual empowering through superheroes, so this is a lost art, I think, because here's the thing. Whenever Hollywood now talks about empowering, uses this terminology, 9 times out of 10, they turn the girl into a girl boss like Captain Marvel. When it comes to Wonder
Exactly.
Woman, at the very least, particularly the first movie, they strike that balance really well.
Yeah, the whole girl boss thing is so superficial, and it's not what some people think it is, because again, it goes into that mentality of Hippolyta to say, you know, basically men, you can never be equals, which no,
That's
that is totally
that's why you sent your daughter to man's world, lady.
yeah, so exactly. And that is just so backwards. When you actually analyze a lot of the way DC writers have written Clark and Diana over the years, it's not just New 52 problems. It has been a problem for decades, from pre-crisis all the way into, post-crisis and Flashpoint. Even you've stated, with reading Flashpoint and knowing that Flashpoint Wonder Woman story, and then the
When you read the full story, you're like, what the hell were you doing with that movie?
right, and then you see the movie, and it's like, yeah, what happened? You know, so yeah, it is a lot of the decisions. Again, it's not of the concept of Clark and Diana's relationship, um, and not particularly the concept of the characters as individuals, because again, as we are putting it together, New 52 um, aligns so much of the golden age. It's the execution, and also the decisions that these creators make to have their own comfort out of these characters. And that's not going to work. The thing is with Superman, even the movie that's coming out, a lot of people are just saying, "Oh, this is going to be Christopher Reeves yet again." He is Superman because he is acting like that iteration yet again. Um, you know, and if you want to say that Superman is a feel good character, like the whole Hope Core type thing, that can become very superficial. And you want these characters, yeah, to be inspirational and stuff like that, but you can't just have them as those superficial icons. You know, they have to have a story that is truly genuine and truly that relatable and resonates. You know, that is the how to have these characters truly have that longevity. And the reason why they have lasted for 80 years, 80 plus years, honestly, I would say is only because they are seen as icons.
Mm-hmm.
When they are seen as symbols of, like, you recognize the S or you recognize the double W's, but to know the character for themselves, no, a lot of people don't know the characters for themselves. If they did, they wouldn't be having a fit over New 52. They wouldn't think that Superman is just this galoot, this American poster boy for, borderline rah-rah America, or just this, happy-go-lucky sunshine Boy Scout. You wouldn't think that Wonder Woman is, just because she's from an island of women, that is her. You could sexualize her, or that you have this idea that the Amazons are like the Futurama versions or something, or that Diana is just this warrior woman, you know. And yeah, again, you blame the creators for this, but as a fan, if you go back and read, you know, certain stories, you get the basically the through line of who these characters are supposed to be. And again, New 52 really did not veer off too far from the character's intent. Yes, they did have flaws. You have Wonder Woman, especially with the Zeus origin. Um, for me, as I've said, I can take it or leave it. I can take it because it gives the drama of the gods, the god family dysfunction. I can leave it because I do prefer the clay origin because of its purity and because of all, and what it represents for Hippolyta. But it's just not that important. What's important is that we have a Diana who is respected and that she is elevated, you know.
Yeah, it's like I'm just like this is the problem is that fans look at this and just go, "Oh my gosh, it's so horrible." But I'm like, yeah, but is the character respected? Like, I'm sorry, that first Wonder Woman movie respected the character. Like, no matter what you want to say about Gal or even Snyder's version of Wonder Woman, that first movie respected that version of the character and elevated it. I'm sorry to tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they really could, in order to kind of save more of the movie, it could have been that Steve was the older guy,
Yeah, they
he was,
didn't, particularly when they borrowed so much from the first volume of Perez.
yeah, like you didn't have to have that because that kickstarted Diana's obsession with Steve, and basically we wouldn't have Tom King's version because he, has said that he's pretty much influenced by 1984. So yeah,
That
we
explains
definitely,
so much.
yeah,
He's
so we
he's
definitely,
he's inspired by the worst Wonder Woman movie ever.
I mean, that really just shows his taste or lack
Mm-hmm.
thereof.
Very lack thereof.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean,
But
again, this,
mhm.
oh, I was just gonna say this goes into the quote. I said that these heroes are, they were first supposed to be, these inspiration for children, and you
At the
know,
time, that's who the audience for comic books were, Brett.
yes, that was, and of course, children, they gravitate to so much more um of other things, whether it's video games or other characters, anime, manga, things like that. So Western comic books, they struggle a little bit, and the characters, they struggle too. But ultimately, still, even if it's not for the children, even as adults, no matter the age, really, these characters are still supposed to have this purpose of inspiration. I just don't see how having Superman basically be a ticking time bomb and codependent on a love interest is inspirational. I don't see how turning Wonder Woman into a sad sack for a dead bland man is inspirational. I
Dead
just don't
bland
see it.
man. Oh my god. I love the way you phrased it, Britt, and I love the fact that it's now become stuff that the people of Comics League repeat, like legit. Again, in the chat, people brought up Sugar Honey Iced Tea.
I mean, this is a PG 13, show. So yeah, I have to get creative, and I'm glad and honored that people are using my vocabulary
It's
because
so entertaining.
because we have to. I mean, me. If we were, uh, R-rated or whatever,
Let me put it this way. I talked to
uncensored,
Britt off recording, and yeah, yeah.
yeah, my vocabulary would be very colorful, but I have to find creative ways to still be colorful, but at the same time, yeah, very entertaining, and for the audience to be able to use the words too. As I said, we're trying to keep this PG 13.
Yeah, exactly. But so then we get to the legacy of the relationship. So Britt, elaborate.
Okay, so people think that Clark and Diana's relationship, it just comes from New 52, or it comes from Frank Miller, or It's just, when Steve and Lois kick the bucket or whatever and go 12 feet under down to back to where they came from in, Hades. Um, that is when Clark and Diana can be together. And no, for me, Steve and Lois do not have to die for Clark and Diana to be together.
It's
If
more
you have
fun
to,
that way.
I mean, no, that's really petty. But to to first of all, it shows that obviously Clark and Diana aren't relying on Steve and Lois. Like that is not their purpose. And second, it really challenges the fans and the creators to, okay, now that Steve and Lois don't they're not fulfilling this checkbox love interest role, what else can they offer? And obviously, they can't offer anything else because it's difficult for them to not be the checkbox love interest. Lois, she's basically in the background. Um, she doesn't have a role. And then Steve, I mean, as the big brother, the older father figure type, whatever that Perez, wanted to give, that works. He is supposed to be that, even as a big brother, to have that sort of positive male outlook for Diana because she's dealt with Hercules, she's dealt with Zeus. Gosh, she knows those stories. So to see present time this older male figure that is, like I said, is very positive, that works, but that doesn't mean that she has to be romantically involved with him. And then with Clark, he is everything. He is a man of power, but he is the antithesis of that of Zeus and Hercules. And he also is so humbled and has a quote unquote human heart because of his humble beginnings in Smallville. So again, he is everything, you know, that Diana looks for to be that representation of, okay, can I find a good man that um, represents everything? And that is Clark. Their relationship was just teased, you know, but you do have this obvious connection because again, Diana was still created as the equal counterpart. So with here, the 1944 Sensation Comics 33 issue,
And the picture
Diana
is right down here.
Diana is in disguise. I forgot they are in Etta. They're undercover, and obviously the man that she's dancing with, it isn't Clark, but it's just the fact that a man, is dressed as Clark,
And
and
can I
just that.
say, it's hilarious how Diana goes disguised. The only disguise she wears is the mask over her eyes.
Right, it's very simple. It's
Mhm.
simple times, where a mask and glasses can
No, I mean, in
alter a
addition
lot.
to wearing her costume,
Right.
well, it is appropriate in this context, but I guess that works.
Yeah. So, but the fact that, you know, for Marston to say it's appropriate in a sense of, yeah, that makes sense. It's so natural. That's your first tease. And then, of course, you have teases throughout pre crisis and to where, you know, you have where they are, there's moments, I think it was from a JLA issue where I think it was the Atom that asked Diana about her relationship with Clark, and she said that she has a boyfriend. So it's like, of course, you have to break up Steve, whatever. But it was just the fact that those types of instances were throughout, pre-crisis, and up until post-crisis. At the beginning, of course, Clark and Diana meet, and it's like this rush of a infatuation, this crush, and of course, it doesn't work out mostly because of the Superman editorial and John Byrne, wanting Clark to be this basically to make himself feel like he wasn't good enough for Diana, that he was just this boy from Kansas, and really put Diana on a pedestal. But throughout post crisis, when they, you know, um, worked on their friendship and gained that respect for one another, those feelings resurfaced from time to time. And yeah, it did resurface while Clark was married, but honestly, I don't care about the marriage. Who cares? And it was a genuine love that was building to where you have them in Elseworlds, and the biggest Elseworlds is Kingdom Come. But again, it doesn't, their relationship is not defined by whether Lois and Steve are 12 feet under. It is defined by their respect for each other and just that whole building of their dynamic as friends. Then
Yeah.
you have the Trinity. Of course, the Trinity is a very fake concept. It's really just the world's finest with a third wheel. If
It's
you
the
want to say
world's finest and Wonder Woman.
exactly, um, basically like Warner Brothers and Dot, from
Hmm.
the Animaniacs.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's basically what Wonder Woman is. Um, and funnily enough, they have Super Sons and Trinity as Yakko, Wacko, and Dot. Um,
Oh, can Trinity be wacko?
what? Yeah, because Dot is cute. So I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
insult. Yeah, I don't
yes,
want to
thank you.
insult Dot like that.
Yeah, I remember once that's kind of funny is that I was looking at a Twitter post today because I hate my life, and these people, someone called Steve Diana's Lois Lane, and so I said that's an insult to Lois Lane, and I go, no, that's an insult to Steve Trevor,
Well, I mean, there are
or
insults.
they're both equal, so it's a mutual insult. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that's an equal insult because I mean, both of them, again, they are dependent on being the love interest. Lois, honestly, I mean, of course, I am always honest that, her character has a difficult time, like being independent. You can say that, oh, she had a book in the 60s. Okay, but what was the concept of that book?
it's
She,
oh, you mean the story where she got blackface in order to infiltrate Little Africa?
yeah, yeah.
That's the name of Metropolis is Harlem, by the way.
Hmm.
I wish I was making that up, Britt.
I honestly, I wish you were too, but
But
again,
trust me, I'm not racist. So
of course you're not. DC, however, they,
some of them are,
yeah,
yeah.
they tend to do some very questionable things.
Yeah,
Um,
like I just love it comes out and the cover is legit like, will Superman still love me as a black woman? And I go, the very
and
fact
then
that you have to ask that.
yeah, and the fact that the ending, he basically does not give an answer. Yeah, that at the
Oh my
time,
god.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh, it's so bad.
But with that though, it was basically about her chasing Superman and trying to get him to marry her, and just all of these weird shenanigans of, and Lois isn't a girl's girl. She does not have female characters as friends. It's either she's being catty towards them, even with, Tom King trying to make her friends with Selena, it was very much just
Forced.
because of the forced and the world's finest, having their love interest, but it wasn't anything, it felt truly genuine. I mean, even with the costume change, so I mean, Lois doesn't have a costume. She had a tacky flower dress. That's supposedly a costume, whatever. But um but yeah, she just doesn't have that. She doesn't have that independence that fans, claim that she's supposed to have. She doesn't have a story of her own. Truly, it always will revolve and does revolve around Superman. And just her character, I just don't like.
Join the
um,
club.
I she just doesn't represent a female character or females in general as they should be. You can try to have this girl boss thing and for her to basically have Superman on this metaphorical leash type thing, but that is not empowering to me, to make it seem like you're stepping on other female characters. As I said, she doesn't have female friends. Um, and with that book that they so love to reference, every time another female character is um, a feat that was featured in that book, it was always a competition. And of course, one of the editors actually said that it's because of her name being on the title, it would be in Lois's favor. I don't like that, because you are purposely writing these other female characters as below Lois. And no, that is not a feminist message at all. Wonder Woman, it's never been like that for her. Even writing writing her giving chances to say Cheetah or something like that, she always calls other female characters sister. And that is what Wonder Woman is about. That is what feminism is about as well as equality of the sexes, is also just the respect overall in general of women, respecting other women. And, Lois just does not represent that. Steve is very much bland man. He doesn't represent anything, to think is compelling. He is in the military, okay, whatever. But as a character and who he is supposed to be to Diana, the only thing, as I said earlier, if you write him as an older man, being that older man representation, to see him as a positive influence from the world, but he's not a romantic interest, yeah, sure, that works. But just for him to be a romantic interest because of the first man she met is very Disney-fied, and that's just not the message that you want to give young girls. You can always have that love at first sight type thing in that, again, very Disney type way, but you still have to get to know that person. And it's not, um, relationships aren't just put together.
Yeah,
And the way DC represents relationships by default is very much just put together.
exactly.
With Clark and Diana's relationship, it is always something that is built. It is never something that's forced. We can
So
argue
what you're
that New
saying
52,
is it's not just fan service.
right. Oh, that was a great transition.
Yeah, I was like,
Um,
I love when that happens when like someone mistakenly gives me a fantastic transition.
yeah, it is not a relationship that is forced. We can, like I said, we can argue that New 52 needed more time, but it just, again, their relationship still wasn't, oh, it's meant to be, just default, no type of building to it. It needed that. And it's crazy that the fans actually questioned it too. It was like that, how can you say that, oh, Superman and Wonder Woman are obvious, but yet with the traditional relationships, you say, oh, it's meant to be, or they should always be together. Well, isn't that something obvious? Isn't
And
that
I'm like,
something
wait,
that
wait, wait. You realize that if you're saying, well, that's obvious, that kind of shows me that you support it.
it's not even the support, because obviously they don't. It's more so that they are basically admitting that it's something that's natural, that is
Mhm.
something that it makes sense, and it's something that yeah, it's something that is, you know, well, I don't want to use obvious again, but yeah, I'll just simply say it's something that's natural, and they don't want um, to accept that. And again, you don't have to because we were told to accept one iteration of Superman. However, it's more so the acceptance of everyone has a different preference. Everyone has a different perspective of these characters and they gravitate, to different iterations. It's more so accepting the fact that we need the multiverse to show these different iterations. And
Not only that, it's one of the things that I always say on the channel. It's like, look, all the stuff that I say on my channel is literally just based upon what I myself have read. There may be new information in comics or old comics, but based upon what I personally have read, this is why I have the opinions I do.
right. And again, this show is always, yeah, we have our own opinions, but we also bring facts too. Like it's 50-50 equal to our opinion and facts. But well, I wouldn't even say it's 50-50 because I would say like 90 or 85% is always facts, you know. And that's why we have these beautiful presentations. Um, but yeah, Clark and Diana's relationship, they're not fan service. And the fact that Jurgen said that Clark and Diana's relationship is fanboy porn, it really just
You wonder
it
why I don't respect these old hands at DC.
right. It was very disrespectful. And okay, so with having the Instagram page, I am tagged in a lot of posts. And around, certain times, I'm tagged with wedding photos, engagement photos, proposals, maternity photos, cosplayers, whether they are a couple or they have their whole entire family. Halloween, and during these times, I love seeing real life, couples and families because it shows, first of all, there's a lot of, diversity that is celebrated within this fandom, Super Wonder fandom. And again, that goes into what these characters were originally about. And to see this positiveness of families, of couples, and for a creator to say that, oh, it's just fanboy porn, it really disrespects those families and those couples. And when they share their stories with me, it was one um woman who shared her story, and she was a cancer survivor, and her husband was there through her entire treatment, and he stayed with her, you know, through the very difficult moments, and that moment where she really was down, he was her strength, and she actually used the shelter from the storm quote. And it was like, it made me so emotional to know that that quote is so powerful. And that is what that
It's,
was.
it's almost like it's almost like we named our universe after that.
Yes. And to know that that resonated with her because of course her going through the battle with cancer was her storm, but her husband was her shelter from that. And it was like, oh my God.
And
you
and
know,
that's what's called relatability, Brit.
yes. So when these detractors talk about Clark and Diana's relationship being eugenics or being or that we as fans are fascist or just those very harmful stuff being said,
Terms
I
that no
just
one knows the meanings of anymore.
right. It just like again, I just think about these couples and families who feel the positiveness of Super Wonder. And even with Power Couple it's not about power in that literal term. Power couple is used as is the basic meaning is, of course, being of equals, being of, these two main individuals who have their own, who are very successful, who represent, again, inspiration and things like that. They come together to bring something else unique.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but the way that the fans have turned that around to such negativity of, oh, power couple, in terms of when labeling for Clark and Diana, it's about eugenics. It's about them losing their humanity, that all they care about is power. But yet when Lois becomes Superwoman, you have fans saying, oh, now that she has powers, they can make another kid because John, they feel like John is a he he's no good, as a son, that they don't want him anymore or something like that, or that they can be in outer space on the moon and stuff like that. I-
That she can
Isn't that,
finally understand him truly. So you're just admitting that Lois doesn't understand him.
yeah, or having powers, right? Having powers mean that she can understand him, but I
More on
thought that
that
she,
later, though.
right, but I thought that she could already understand him as Clark. So, so yeah, these double standards are very out there, I would say.
Exactly. So then, see, here's the thing, and I get a question that I have, particularly when it comes to truth. A question that I get a lot on the channel is, should Superman and Wonder Woman keep the secret identities and stuff? And my answer to this is always like, at first, yes. Well, Wonder Woman, I don't think really needs a secret identity, period, particularly with being anchored on truth and stuff and not like hiding a part of yourself. But it's still like, I feel like eventually, and Britt, I know you echo this as well, down the line, yeah, they can do an identity reveal. And again, show a super criminal preparing to attack their family. And then it's like, they're like, are you crazy? He's married to Wonder Woman. What do you think is going to happen?
Exactly. I with Okay. So with Diana, we'll start with her first. With Diana, I would say that the way Perez, had her as a public identity, she was a public figure, but she wasn't that celebrity, like, you know, um, and she just was this. If she is the embodiment of truth, she will be, you know, forthright about everything. And that's what we love about her. And yeah, with going with what Perez did, he didn't have her as this celebrity type that we see on reality TV. She was just this person that was honest. With Clark, however, the truth is a little fecal, I would say, because he's supposed to stand for truth. He is a reporter, but yet he is hiding the biggest secret with everyone. With him saying in the New 52 that he doesn't wear a mask because he wants people to feel that he's approachable, and that he doesn't want to instill fear into anyone. He wants people to see his face because that builds trust. Okay, so it's Clark that wears the mask, which is the glasses. But again, you are a journalist and you uncover the truth for anything else, but for yourself, you are hiding your truth. Even with being with Lois, Lois is supposed to be this truth seeker, and that she'll do anything for the truth. And part of her earlier times, her whole thing was trying to get Superman's identity. But once she is romantically attached to him, knowing his identity, she is keeping that lie. And not only that, but she's using him as a source for stories, and to where she is winning man-made awards. So you are lying to the public. you are lying to yourself, and you aren't really being that embodiment of truth or that truth seeker that DC or whoever else wants to push them as. So with Diana, though, she pushes Clark to just be truthful with himself, to not feel like his heritage is a burden, and that, yeah, at some point, he has to be truthful with the world. He can't go just that whole time, especially as a journalist that spent his whole adult life saying that he, writes for the truth, stands for the truth. But yet again, he is holding back this huge secret from everyone and basically lying. No, that I just don't agree with that. So with and that is also why I advocate for him to be a global correspondent, and write, you know, have a blog, especially in 2025. I mean, in this modern day, that is what Superman needs. He doesn't need to be stuck with the Daily Planet. I don't like what Slott is doing with having the Daily Planet on everything. Like, why does the Daily Planet have to have a branch in Gotham when Gotham has its own, like, um newspaper,
I
whatever?
know, I know. It's so stupid of an idea. I'm like, just use what's already existing. But no, you have to do it this way. And I just go, what? By the way, I don't think they're actually gonna put a place on Themyscira. I think when they said that, it was more of giving like, oh, from Gotham to Themyscira, we'll have locations.
Honestly, if they have a location of the Daily Planet in Themyscira, I'm going to
This will
throw a
complete
fit.
Brit's transformation into the Joker.
Yes. I mean, I'm already like, I would say I'm like 95% there. So yeah, this might be the tipping point because it doesn't make sense. And especially with how DC has just the handling of the mascara and the Amazons. It does not make sense. They are very much just a plot device for anything, that they think that, oh, this is very convenient to use. Mark Wade used Themyscira for absolute power, and you have all these heroes on Themyscira, but at the same time, what doesn't make sense to me is that throughout absolute power, actually, what's going on with the Amazons was never addressed. Like, it really took a pause for that event. And then it's kind of like, okay, everything goes back to normal of, oh yeah, this is happening, but we still do not have this sort of like emphasis on the Amazons of what happened to them. You have an in Birds of Prey, of course, with Kelly Thompson, but King, Wade, if this is supposed to be, if Wonder Woman is supposed to be part of the Trinity, if she's supposed to be important, then yeah, her world should be important. Um, at the moment with King, I really don't want it to be, but I'm just saying if you were to have a better writer to handle this particular storyline, yeah, why no reactions to from the hero community at all? I mean, yeah, we barely get the interaction, the reaction from Diana because she only cares about the bland man. But, still with this story, it should be far more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to this is the other part about Super Wonder that really gets like ignored is the concept of gender equality. And that's kind of what I mean when I say you take the strongest man, the strongest woman, or it's like the both beings that I would argue in the DC universe are the highest in terms of like inspiration, and you put them together. There's a reason why, like, for like couple stuff, it's not Clark and Lois, it's Clark and Diana, because that is marketable as hell for gender equality.
Right. It's so, with the new movie, there's a lot of, well, of course, from the Lois fandom of why Lois isn't in the marketing and the promo. She is in one of the promo arts, and of course, it is Lois basically in a the usual, romantic type art, but that's all she is, again, as a love interest. But to actually, and she also had the Funko things, but Funko, I mean, they made a James Gunn Funko. They
They
make,
make Funkos about. I want my Zack Snyder Funko, but it's like,
yeah,
but it's like it's funny. I see people complaining that there's no Lois action figure. I'm like, what would you do with a Lois figure besides burn it?
yeah.
I had to. I
Oh,
had to. You know
wow.
me.
Well, I mean, I would not say that I don't agree with you,
No,
so
no, but I mean, I'm like Hawkgirl. I could see she should have an action figure, and McFarlane is even doing the comics one. But it's like non-superhero action figures. So what you gonna do? Oh, this is Lois. Oh wait, hang on. Um, I need a visual aid. All right, so pretend that this is Lois. Okay, I'm gonna go submit a paper to the Daily Planet, dun, 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 and then be saved by Superman.
exactly. That's exactly what it would be. I mean, they would use the figure and have the Superman figure carrying the Lois figure.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what they want. But yeah, Lois, I mean, even her Funko, like she looks like just a customized regular person. Like you can't really tell who she is as a character. And I mean, what really can you promote with her except for her relationship with Superman? That's it. You can't really have her. I mean, you can try to have her individual, and I would think that she has a some type of independent character development, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. The
She
only
doesn't
standout.
really, because here's the thing. Again, it's because, and again, this is another thing comic historians said on my show. It's like with Lois, it's kind of interesting about how, like, when you think about it, she can't support a book on her own. She is dependent upon Superman, and she honestly, she always will be.
I mean, we see that with Rucka's Lois book. Superman was in the book, and then halfway through, it transformed into a question book. So even Rucka got bored basically with her character. Um, Lois has they've wanted to do something different with her character since Dark Crisis. Williamson didn't know what to do with her. Tom Taylor made the suggestion to give her powers. Um, and it's kind of like, okay, if you have to give her powers, that truly shows you don't know what to do with her because you have her as EIC for the Daily Planet. That is supposed to be something that, for her character, is supposed to be something celebrated and unique for her and all, but that doesn't even matter. So when you resort to giving her powers and making her basically Diana Light, you are proving to us that, yeah, ultimately, Clark and Lois's relationship is unbalanced. And she needs to become like she's the one that becomes a female Superman. With, well, with her costume that she had and with the same exact powers and everything like that. And she really didn't do anything. She was basically written as kind of like his sidekick, and also just it's just not something that it didn't feel like an equal perspective. When Sewell wrote Power Couple, it more so geared towards Diana's perspective, and that's what we want. The
Yeah, the
relationship.
majority of the character development was hers.
Yeah, the relationship always veers towards Diana because again, we are for her in her perspective, we get the truth. We get the realness of it. And there's something about writing her, even for me, it's something about writing Diana and her perspective is so poetic that even with Clark, with him, it still feels like you have to hold back a little bit. You have to, it, it's a certain limitation with him, you know. And then in the way you have to write his character, you have to gradually get out of that limitation. With Diana, it's like full on, she is very confident within herself of who she is, what she loves, her purpose and everything like that. With Clark, again, it's a slow progression type thing. And while that is interesting to write, it's still something that's kind of like, okay, we need to get through this. And with his conflict of the back and forth of his identity and everything like that, it's like that does it does become a burden in that sense, because with how not only has DC kind of diluted the complexity of his identity, they have complicated it. Because when you write Superman, it's like he doesn't have a set personality. And again, he doesn't supposed to have this galoot act. Like, and that is very much an act. But the way DC has made it seem like that is what he's supposed to be. Even in Slott's book, you when in the beginning pages, how Clark is acting like that, like a big overgrown dork. And the way he's drawn, this is the type of character they think he is. So when you try to write him as this laid back type character as New 52 was, it's so different and unique. For us, it's easy for us to write it. For DC, it's very difficult. But like I said, Diana, because she is
For
so,
no reason, it's hard. She's not a hard character to write for.
yeah, the reason why they think that Diana is hard is
It's because they have
because,
no ideas.
well, that, and it's because, like I said, with Clark, they have this idea of him being this galoot. They want him to like lack this self-confidence type thing, and it's kind of like he has to slowly gain it or something like that, or continue to lack it. But with Diana, she's so just out there, and like I said, knowing who she is, she has this, her emotions are just right there. But again, that intimidates the writers, and they just don't know how to write complex characters, so they have to dilute them. And Superman, like I said, is so diluted to a point where you don't know, which way to go for his personality, and oftentimes he lacks personality.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I was about to say what personality.
yeah, the only time he actually had personality was with New 52. Because honestly, like I said, you don't want him to be too much of rough around the edges, but he needs to have a backbone. He needs to have that confidence. Um, you can do the whole secret identity thing without the exaggeration. I mean, when we saw Crisis and that version of Superman, he had a mustache and he was still a journalist, but he acted just the same. New 52, he was quiet, laid back and everything, but he acted just the same. He didn't have that galoot type, you know, bumbling type mentality. He was just quiet, you know, and that was fine. That is how you can make that work. But the exaggeration thing, no, you don't have to go that far into making his character like that. And with Diana, she just basically, with Diana and with Clark being with Diana, yeah, that she takes that away. She takes that he does not have to be written as over exaggerated. He can just be all of himself, you know, basically the whole way through. And writers just, for some reason, they don't don't like that type of concept.
Yeah, exactly. So then we get to the functions that this serves with gender equality, because first you get the idea that it's like essentially what this kind of shows. It's like the other reason why I like this relationship so much is that when you look at, like, particularly in the Charles Sewell book was really good on this, is what it does is they both like learn from each other. It never felt like one was like dominating the other, like you said, or like one was exclusively, like, for lack of a better term, the student. So it's really, when you look at like Superman and Wonder Woman, they both really learn a lot from each other. Like Superman learns to open himself up and not be as, like, for lack of a better term, reserved. And Wonder Woman learns to, like, have a normal life outside of being a superhero.
Exactly. And it's like you can have that what I was trying to say earlier about Diana being kind of like this celebrity having the public identity. She, as I said, she isn't that reality TV celebrity or anything like that. And she's just open with her identity. And what Clark brings is that, yeah, she has a personal life, that she doesn't have to be Wonder Woman. She can just be Diana of the mascara, this island girl. And she also doesn't have to be put on a pedestal. Um, and also Clark, again, he is that antithesis of Zeus and Hercules, and also just the idea of men, period. He is a man from the stars, he's an alien, and he represents otherness just like Diana in a humbled, respectful manner. He doesn't use his power for corruption, and he is also that representation of fighting and being the champion of the oppressed, just as Diana. Diana, she represents that celebration of otherness. She represents, like I said, being honest about yourself and basically not caring of any type of judgments, you know. But with writers, it feels like you do have to be ashamed that you aren't accepted by society. And that is such a backwards thing that Clark and Diana have to conform for society's acceptance. When again, their OG creations, they were supposed to blend in to the a world that is so fascinating because it accepts the differences of people and so multicultural. But now it's like that idea is non-existent. You have to conform to this normalcy that basically, yeah, makes otherness seem like a burden. It makes it seem like it's a bad thing. With you know post crisis, or some Chloe's fans, they called New 52 Superman a battling alien. you know, they
That's xenophobic.
yeah, they called Diana Tiara. They called her, other names, but they are basically supposed to represent still fighting back against that. And the only reason why those fans they felt comfortable to say that is because of DC. Because when Clark and Diana got together, what did they do? They basically had, and it was written by Germans, of course, but this looming type, oh, Superman and Wonder Woman together, well, it might bring doom and gloom or something like that, because it's just unheard of. Even though you have a vast category of quote unquote power couples or supers with supers, it's still something about Clark and Diana that seems so unfathomable. Just something that's so unreasonable or something like that, that they think no, that can't be. It can't be something good with them. And they feel like Clark and Diana have to be humbled. And how do you humble them? You make them seem like they need to be shackled in a sense to these basic Americans, that again are not only, when you think about it, are very much associated with the military. You have Lois with her father, even though she was very distant with her father. You have My Adventures, where Sam is going through this like redemption type thing. Um, and then you have post crisis, well, rebirth, um, and how it's basically a glorification of him before he kicked the bucket, and Clark trying to have his acceptance, and then you have Diana who is glorifying the military because of Steve, and saying that she came, glorifying America too, and saying that she came to this beautiful country. And while it's supposed to be, and it is because of, all the different people, it's still the fact of ignoring the flaws and the corruption of the country.
Because
And
here's how King could have salvaged that. If she said, if she had a thing, yes, this country is beautiful. It may make mistakes, but it's still a beautiful place. That's something.
yeah, but he's saying, oh, she this country is beautiful only because I came here with Steve. And the fact that that you simplified her wanting to be here, or in this country, and her purpose, which he did say in the interview that Diana's purpose, and the heart of her story is Steve, which we definitely rebuke that.
Mm-mm.
um, yeah, again, you are just really slashing the just their whole purpose. It's never about a love interest. It's never about conforming to problematic ways of America. It is fighting against those problematic ways. It is about acknowledging it and speaking out, as I speaking out against it, but also just speaking on it. But yeah, to have Clark and Diana um, in this state currently, where they aren't the inspirational characters that they should be. Like I said, it's crazy that the relationship that these detractors say that, oh, it's so detrimental to the characters, is actually a relationship that keeps the core of who they are supposed to be. But yet, in order for the more traditional relationships to stay as it is, to stay stagnant and everything like that, you have to pretty much warp Clark and Diana.
Yeah, exactly. So then you get to speak. Well, actually, it's interesting you talk about Tom King, because this is a relationship of ideals, not domination. Where with Tom King, really, when you think about it, with Tom King, it's mental domination from Steve to Diana.
Yeah, the whole thing about him dying, first of all, people called it that, oh, someone is going to die. And just that whole thing of how in issue two, they were very condescending towards each other. Um, for Steve to say, oh, I saw that you fought gods and stuff, but this is the US military. You can't fight the military. And I'm kind of
Proceeds to
like,
fight the military.
I'm like, what? And their
I got
King did
news for
not.
you. The whole reason why the Justice League exists is to fight threats that the military can't. So,
Right. And just the fact that he just forces them together. And then when he dies, Diana's entire narrative changes to her only reason for going after Sovereign is for Steve. And then she was manipulated to creating a kid just for Steve. It wasn't that you didn't build that up of Diana having the choice to become a mother, anything like that. It was just for Steve. And then with the fact that Trinity's story as herself, first it was for the Super Sons to have a sister, which, I mean, as we said, the Trinity is fake. So why does Diana's like development or whatever is based on Superman and Batman? And even though we're not claiming her to be her daughter, but just as saying her daughter is
Oh,
basically
she won't
connected
be
to
if Brit and I ever write Wonder Woman.
as you know, she's connected solely to the Super Sons because Batman and Superman has kids. Wonder Woman has to because she's part of the so-called Trinity. And then the fact that Trinity's book is about fathers and daughters. It's not mothers and daughters. It's not Diana. There's no
Even though it's
reflection.
called Trinity, daughter of Wonder Woman.
Right. There's no like perspective of Diana having a child. She never expressed this development at all. And she didn't really express any type of love for Steve either. It was just basically again her being used as a mouthpiece, or even um Sovereign was used as a mouthpiece for telling the long drawn out story to Trinity to say, oh, your mother and father was on the same battlefield. You're honestly, when Sovereign said that about them being on the same battlefield and stuff, and they were in the middle of the war, Steve was not there. I mean, yeah, on when she was, fighting the military, but just her actual fight, Steve was not there. So, yeah, I honestly think that maybe Trinity's origin was actually last minute, was a change of last minute of trying to make Steve important. Um, I mean, because again, even in issue 2, it was like Sovereign said that Diana fought alone and Steve walked away from her. So yeah, the whole thing just really doesn't make sense. And also just that whole perspective of how does Sovereign know the extreme details of telling this story? He wasn't there even with the battle to know what they said to each other. Just things like that. Just it does not make sense. Um,
There's so much about this that doesn't make sense. But
yeah,
onto this, it's like see here's the thing with Superman Wonder Woman by Charles Sewell. Despite what many people will say, neither were like pushed to the side for like it's like what again Tomasi said that Diane deserves a spotlight. Which first off, she's the co-star of the book. Of course, you can't sideline her like you did with Lois while she was baking pies. But it's like with Wonder Woman, with Superman Wonder Woman, not once reading that book do I ever feel like I do with the King Wonder Woman, where she is like a side character. No, she is the lead as well as with Superman. And again, they do deal a lot in terms of character development with her as opposed to Clark.
exactly. And again, it is something to be said that the relationship that people swear reduces Diana, or she's just an accessory, that she just the girlfriend, or she's sidelined, is the very relationship that shows the opposite. But in her own book, with her traditional, relationship, she is sidelined. She is a side character in her own book. She is a plot device in her own book. And she is reduced to the mourning. I wouldn't even call her a girlfriend or anything like that, but whatever she is to Steve, she is mourning him and it's all about him. So yeah, the the arguments made for Clark and Diana's relationship, clearly we can debunk it, because we are seeing firsthand how no, actually that is a problem for the traditional relationships, and fans need to stop projecting. When you know that you have to accept just this problematic thing, with traditional relationships, and that's just like very much a hive mind and just a herd of sheep. More and more, like I said, the Superman fandom um, was called the black sheep of fandoms, of DC fandoms, and honestly,
I've been called worse.
that And it's the fact that, if that means that we stand out and that we don't follow the mindless herd of sheep, regularly, then that's fine because Clark and Diana are characters that's supposed to stand out. They're the ones that's supposed to, be different and celebrate their otherness. So that is not a bad thing, now that we think about it, because we are standing out as we are supposed to, as the characters are supposed to.
Yes, exactly. So then we get to the true joy of Superman and Wonder Woman is that the relationship, again, in reference to like the gender equality thing, it represents honestly what the relationship between a man and a woman can be.
Exactly. It is a relationship of equals. It is, and at the beginning, partners in justice, um, power couple. Again, you hear power couple all the time with celebrity couples, and it's always a good thing. It's supposed to be something of a celebration, and again, with actually knowing what feminism is, with equality of the sexes, Clark and Diana embodies that. They embody truth. They embody respect, honesty, and just that pure, wholesome love. Because again, their relationship was built off of friendship. It's not about downing one for the other or something like that. It's you don't have to do the girl boss thing. You don't have to have Clark be like um, this sensitive, uh, like lapdog or something like that. That's not how you write a relationship. A relationship is supposed to be about respect. And yeah, it is a give and take in a sense. It's also both learning for each other. They have their differences, they have their similarities, and it's supposed to complement, and they do. Um, and also, it's with Clark, you don't have to, again, like I said, the whole thing about these traditional relationships too is again not to you have to warp Clark and Diana and for them to be so codependent. Relationships aren't about codependency. It is you can depend on a person like when it's necessary of them confiding in someone to talk to understand you. But that codependency where you need this person as an emotional crutch or that at times like it feels like the coddling and stuff like that, no, it is very unhealthy. You do not want a relationship like that. Clark and Diana's relationship isn't perfect. We don't want perfection, but it's not unhealthy. And it is something that is truly inspirational. And as I said, having the Instagram page, I see it all the time that this relationship resonates with real life, couples and families that have these emotional stories. They don't just gravitate to Clark and Diana because of the power, you know, they gravitate to them because they see, honestly, the story of these two individuals who have felt othered, who is just trying to make a difference in the world. It's not going by tradition. Um, it's not playing Captain Save a Thought. It's not.
I love the way you phrase things.
It's not a powerful woman becoming a power of fantasy for this bland man. It's not that. It is a couple that truly, respect each other and can bring something to each other that is actually, worth celebrating.
Yeah, exactly. So now, speaking of worth celebrating, Zois has fallen.
Yeah, okay. So this storyline started in issue 21, right?
Yeah,
Or 19.
around that time period. And by the way, this was the first issue that I didn't put in my box of bullshit
Wow.
because I had the entire Lois saga in there from Action Comics and Superman.
Well, okay. So with this story, it was already known that Lois's, powers were going to be temporary. But it's the fact that how it happened to end was so anticlimactic. And even this is very anticlimactic. Um, for Lex to basically say, that, and we saw that throughout the whole thing, was how Clark was very happy that Lois had powers because he felt like, oh, we can go flying together. We can do this and do that. And
You can finally understand me.
yeah, things like that. Even though, honestly, even with the powers, Lois didn't because, you know, with the story and just with everything else, when writers try to have like these emotional like conversations between Clark and Lois, it's always kind of undercut when the fact that Lois does not understand what Clark is going through. So she can't be written in a way that it should actually be Diana. And honestly, we have the perfect example of that, of taking Diana's lines from New Frontier and giving them to Lois in the movie, which again did not make sense because she is not in that realm. You know,
Or remember in Superman and Lois when they gave the whole "you are so much stronger than you think you are" to Lois?
yeah, and or even, Death of Superman, the fact that they gave that whole scene of Clark saying how lucky he was, to Lois, is kind of like, Lois has not been there for you. Like, it was
Mm-hmm.
Diana. Diana was the one who told him in the Justice League versus Teen Titans, she said you can always share your burdens. But in Death of Superman, Clark, to say that Lois knows him, but yet she didn't know his secret identity, it was
Mm-hmm.
like, or she didn't know that he was Superman at that time. It was like, okay, so how does she know you? Like,
And by the way, I love Lex's monologue here about Lois with powers. I'm going to read it real quick.
mm-hmm,
To be so close to greatness, all that power. She could fly by your side. Know what it felt like to be you. But it wasn't just about the powers for her, was it? She knew she could truly make a difference in the world instead of reporting on it.
right. That,
That's right there saying Lois is worthless without the powers.
which honestly, I mean,
It's true.
it's true because what has Lois done within the 80 plus years of her existence, and saying that, oh, she's this Pulitzer winning awarded
Reporter.
journalist, how, like, or reporter, yeah, what actually has she done to make a difference? We saw in Wonder Woman 170, she was reporting on Diana, but who was actually doing the work of making a difference in third world countries, of Diana being the ambassador, of her, being with children and stuff like that. You don't see Lois do that. She, again, as I said earlier, you don't see her with other female characters being an inspiration. Um, you just don't. Even here, you had the Justice League cameo, or you know feature in one of the issues, but she did nothing with
She
the
literally
Justice League.
she's like, it'll be my first league mission, and she just flies in and just flies around
She
again.
just flying, exactly. So it's like, what actually impact has she done with or without powers?
And here's the thing: likely writers are just gonna ignore this. So it's like we'll forget she even had powers in the first place.
And the fact that she's sad about it, and was trying to, well, from the first panel, it was kind of like, it seems that Clark was wanting to figure out how to give her powers back again. And then with Lex saying, basically trying to tempt Clark by saying, I know how you feel, and Clark being angry and stuff, and saying, I can get Lois, powers back. For that to be a thing, to even be a like a attempting holdover and Lois to be sad about it and everything like that, and to say that she basically she can't truly make a difference. Yeah, you try to make this romantic and Jerry, you laughing. You try
I
to
just
make
love it.
you try to make this romantic and how, oh, Clark will always love Lois with or without powers, and they are like this power couple or something, or or whatever you want to say, or they're equals. But no, they aren't. It's always going to be an unbalanced relationship. And no, it's not just about the powers. It's just the fact that, yeah, Lois just does not have that impact. She is just a reporter. She is just being at the computer, typing whatever. Superman is her source. None of her work actually impacts the wider of the DCU. It never has. So to try to emphasize on her as a reporter or whatever, it just doesn't work. If it didn't work, at the beginning, it's not going to work now.
Well, remember, it's like the one time they tried to apply her journalistic powers to like the overall DCU was that Greg Rucka book, but even that didn't make sense because it was like all of a sudden she's aware that there's a multiverse with all the reboots, and I go, how would Lois know this?
Exactly. Just trying to make her more than what she is.
And real quick, the other thing they did with this, if you notice, so she's still the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet and stuff. So here's my problem. And this is a position I've held since the very beginning of this channel. This is what really annoys me about Lois. To make her big, to make her cool, to try and make you like her, they turn her into other characters. Like they turned her into Perry White previously. In this, they straight up turned her into a Diana.
Right. I mean, she's very much dollar store Diana.
No, she's 10-cent store Diana.
Wow. I don't even know if that even exists.
I think it existed years ago, but still, that's my point.
Wow.
She may even be the penny store Diana.
Jared, good Lord.
Hey, is there half a penny? I'm like,
wow. Okay. So, wow. All right. So, yeah, trying to make her half a penny Diana. Yeah, it doesn't work because Diana is who she is. She is, like I said, she understands every aspect of who Cal, Clark, and Superman is. She is the one who helps him balance it all out and pull it all together to just be this one man. It's not that he has to be one over the other. And that's another thing, is that when Lois was Superwoman, she was mostly in the costume. Like they had one little break, or a few, no, just like a couple of breaks.
There were a few scenes, but it wasn't like anything really big. And then it was like she considered the powers fun and games. She said that when Jimmy got hurt.
Exactly. So how can you say that, how can you truly accept Lois with having the powers when honestly that whole thing of balancing the hero life and the civilian life or whatever, it's not shown with Clark and Lois together. They basically just became Superman and Superwoman.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically 24/7. With Sewell, he basically tried to show, and he did, fairly well, to show Clark and Diana together, and it wasn't just Superman and Wonder Woman. It was still Clark, Cal, Superman, and Diana. It was not just that's all that was.
Now, I will say though, do you know what this era did well? Do you know what Zois did, Brit, that was actually very helpful?
What was that?
It convinced the overall comic book Twitter fan base how two-sided how what's the proper word? Hypocritical the Lois fan base is.
Yeah.
Because it's like they were like, oh, he needs to be with a human being without powers because that humanizes him. Here they're like, oh, she should keep the powers.
Right. And it's only because it is Lois,
Mm-hmm.
but if he is to, and doesn't that fall into the whole eugenics thing?
Yeah, and they were like, imagine how strong their kids will be. And I go, hello,
Right. The
Google.
the double standards of the fandom, it is very ridiculous, and they aren't self-aware of themselves at all.
No, they're not. They clearly are not. Which it annoys me. I'm just glad this era is over. And I love how many times in this issue they bring up chances are that these powers are not returning. Even Lois is like, I don't want them anymore, pretty much, until Lex has this whole little thing. But I love this where Lex says, what if she begins to resent you? And I go, this is DC Comics. There's no way they'll ever put actual, like, drama in a story, because after all, didn't Tomasi say no drama, no story? So when you take it like that, it's almost like there's no story in Clovis.
Right, they will never have them actually like go against each other because when you have clothes go against each other, you see the actual cracks in their relationship. Again, their relationship is very unbalanced, and the conflicts and all of that that they will have shows they aren't meant to be together. That they are on two different levels, um, mentally and emotionally. And like I said, Clark, he has to basically dilute himself and reject, a major part of himself to fit for Lois. So yeah, when if you poke holes, like basically it's gonna be like Swiss cheese, you know,
Oh, it's gonna
and
be like a squad of U.S. Marines firing machine guns at a wall. Swiss cheese.
right, and that will show how incompatible they are. With Clark and Diana, again, their differences and conflicts are natural, and because it's going by their perspective as Clark essentially being this child immigrant and how he lived within the world of, world of man, and he grew up to understand the perspective. Diana, she is an adult immigrant. She's coming to this world that she doesn't understand, man's world perspective. She understands her culture and and celebrating that. So Clark helps her understand just that man's world perspective while Diana is helping him understand cultural perspective. And that give and take and that works for a relationship. Again, with Clark and Lois, it is always him changing for Lois, and it's stripping him to basically be like a Marvel character, you know? It's like he was just Clark Kent, and as I say, he drunk some like toxic milk and was able to gain powers because they want to take away that he is a Kryptonian or an alien from another world that makes him so unique. Yeah, so with that, there really is no story. And like you said, no drama, no story, but or no conflict, no story. But Tomasi was set himself up as very hypocritical himself when he did the same thing with Rebirth. He didn't really want drama with Clark and Lois. He wanted it to be like this happy-go-lucky family with Lois baking pies.
Yeah, exactly. And we all know how that turns out. But speaking of happy go lucky, we also have, as you know, Britt and I like to end on a positive note, unless, of course, we're talking about Tom King. But Absolute Wonder Woman 8. Wow, quite an issue. And again, the Absolute Universe never ceases to amaze me with how they can take for lack of a better, classic villain from like the lineup and reinvent them. Because Dr. Poison being literal gas, I didn't see that coming.
That is honestly the best like change up and very unique. Yeah, to be a literal gas is very like it's kind of like a that is such an obvious idea and such like why didn't anyone think of that sooner?
I know it's like last week we talked about Absolute Superman, and Brainiac being a murderous mad scientist. I'm like, yeah, why didn't anyone do this?
Yeah, the ideas that Absolute Universes is coming up with, it's something that could have happened in main continuity, but as Snyder said, they're more conservative and have restrictions. But honestly, if you integrate these ideas into main continuity, I guarantee you would have gotten a newer fan base. To it, Absolute Wonder Woman really shows that you can reinvent, especially Diana, because honestly, Snyder's Batman is just Frank Miller's Batman plus Michael Bay. And
That's the best explanation. That's the best description of Absolute Batman. I will say though, they are like reinventing the rogues in new ways. Like Mr. Freeze in this is literally terrifying.
yeah, you can have that, but with Absolute Wonder Woman, what makes her so like the better reinvention,
Mhm.
she remains Diana.
That's the part that never ceases to amaze me on this, because again, I say this every single goddamn time we talk about this book. This shouldn't work as well as it does. Like this should, again, when we saw the design, everyone was like, okay, it's just gonna be female Kratos. And like you said, Kelly Thompson tried to do that, but she couldn't make it work. She's like, I'm just gonna make her Diana. And also the idea that Diana, this is my theory, this is the Hall of Justice. I mean, we'll be coming at, because combined with the fact that like Diana's gonna round up the Justice League, it feels like, I know Absolute Batman is like the highest selling book, but it seems like Absolute Wonder Woman is the flagship Absolute book at this point.
Right, because again, she is the one. I mean, what is Batman gonna do? Especially with how the narrative that Snyder is setting for Absolute Batman, it doesn't seem like he cares for a team up or a group, you know. It he's very much solo. He's, as I said, Frank Miller and Michael Bay together and turned it basically up to 12, you know. And it just seems very immature at the same time. And Snyder is just having fun in his sandbox and whatnot. So that's that. With Absolute Superman, I feel like still trying to find his footing
Mm-hmm.
because again, these writers have such a difficult time trying to give Cal basically the personality and the the characteristics that he was supposed to have from Golden Age. And for Absolute Superman to be, well, that champion of the oppressed and be that kind of loner type character, it's kind of like Aaron is falling off just a little bit. We have to see more of his Superman. It's like he's writing everything around him instead of Cal himself. So
The
we
next
need more of
issue,
him.
from what we see, is going to be mostly Superman.
Yeah, so we need more of him to understand his character, especially in this world. Because honestly, yeah, it's supposed to be like a new 52, but the only one that's really standing out and that's kind of like, yeah, it is a better version of New 52 is Wonder Woman. But Superman, I mean, you could have with Aaron, honestly, you could have gotten Greg Pak to write him.
Yep.
I feel like he would have really grasped Absolute Superman because he is supposed to be the new 52 version. So I feel like someone else could have, grasped that a little bit better. Um Everyone else is just so unique. Honestly, I really don't see how like is very much giving misfits because I really don't see this being a Justice League. Like everyone is so like they have this uniqueness as we see in the regular Justice League. However, it's so different. Like every character for this absolute world is so different, you know. And it's so like obviously they will have their team ups in 2026, but it's going to be really fascinating to see how they put them together as a team up because right now I really just don't see it. Like, you know, like I said, because they are so different.
But
Um,
all I'm saying is that it is kind of cool to see Diana send. By the way, the other thing I want to bring up is it just me, or did Sherman's art kind of improve because it's brighter and a little more crisper than it was before?
I think it's the coloring.
Hmm.
It I would say I still enjoyed the art from was it 6 and 7?
Yep, that was good. I love that one.
I still enjoyed that, but Sherman is, I mean, eh,
He grows on you.
that and the way Diana is drawn, she's kind of like, honestly, I like the way the costume is right now. I feel like the armor part of it and everything is too much. This seems a little bit more, it's not too much, you
Hmm.
know? And I just like that. And it gives her more of that, the way Thompson is writing her as such like this. She's giving Disney princess, but not in an obnoxious way. Like the
Where she's
way,
talking to animals and all that stuff.
yeah, it's so like adorable. When Rucka tried to do the whole Disney fied thing for Rebirth, Diana seems so much like an airhead and like this doe-eyed, like, you know, just very obnoxious type princess. You know, it was too much of the silliness of her. This Diana, she's just so soft. You know, regardless of her being hell, she still remains this just this bright ball of sunshine, you know. But again, like I said, not in a obnoxious type way.
Yeah, exactly. But it's and we also finally get the reveal. I love Diana sending out birds to find the other Amazon because that's so to your point, Disney princess, and then it's revealed, hey, Poison is gonna lead us to the Amazons. Now here's the thing: do you think Poison is telling the truth? Because it could be leading her to Veronica Cale, which means it's an ambush.
Right. Well, from the solicits, yeah, she's going to be in a trapped in a maze or something like that.
Ooh, I just got an idea. I don't mean an idea for our story. I mean, what if Veronica Cale is an Amazon?
Wow, that would be a twist.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, she's not lying if she brings Diana to Veronica Cale.
Wow. That would honestly be a crazy twist.
Because I'm like, okay, so wait a second. Because it's like, we don't know, like, if the Amazons are immortal in this universe. So, and plus, who knows how long Diana was in hell for. So, and honestly, that definitely seems like a way to reinvent the villain, like Absolute. Watch, if I'm
Yeah.
right, I will have manifested that.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you have been manifesting a lot lately.
2026, Tom King leaves Wonder Woman. I'm manifesting it right now. In disgrace. Latest 2026. Could be earlier, but latest 2026. But overall, I love this series. I will always pick this up. Britt, let me ask you this. How do you rate this issue out of 10?
Honestly, a 9.5
Mm-hmm.
because I loved the fact of Diana just being so adorable.
Yeah, she's like a Disney princess. I love her discovering a pigeon for the first time because it's not a
Yes.
bird that's in hell and stuff. So I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
That really is what sold it because she was like, "Oh, she was talking to the crow and she was like, "Yeah, I've seen a lot of crows because of course crows are a dark, you know, kind of that type of bird." But she's like, "You're beautiful too, you know. regardless of the sort of dark energy that you have, but at the same time, she just loved animals, and that really, again, giving Diana that softness, regardless of her upbringing, is that is Diana. Yes, she is going to be a little tough and maybe a little rough around the edges, and that's something that, again, we always acknowledge the flaws of New 52.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I mean, New 52 Diana wasn't so much of a warrior woman as some people exaggerate her to be, but if she would have shown a little bit more of, again, like what Sewell did, she talked to little girls. She explained what her position was as being the god of war. She loved to dance and go go to clubs and things like that. She loved ice cream. Think that those small little things really make the character, and because it wasn't emphasized on, because so many people want to emphasize on a negative or the things that basically gain like a lot of shock value, it just brings a lot of negativity, and that's something that honestly New 52 Diana didn't deserve.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, before we wrap up this, there's one other thing I want to bring up. Every time Diana prays to the gods, she prays to all the gods that in the clay origin give her powers. Obviously, she's adding Hecate, but it's really cool the way that Kelly Thompson writes it this time. So I'm going to read that. Where she goes, Hecate, she of the crossroads, death and magic. Athena, wisdom in battle and beyond. Artemis, the wildness in within us all. Hestia, the fires of home, loyalty above all else. Aphrodite, love and passion, the hunger of life itself. Demeter, the land and life, mother of us all, particularly if Diana has the clay origin in this. And Hera, queen of the gods, eye of the future. I just love that.
Yeah, it's if we were to have that in the 52 or something like that, instead of having Hera as like the evil stepmother or whatever, again, it would have gone over a little bit better. But Thompson did say that she's inspired by Historia, or basically, Historia is, she kind of wants it all to connect to that. So that is, yeah, that is definitely a template. And honestly, I would say that Historia, it's, if Gunn is going to do the Paradise Lost, and which is a prequel to DCU Wonder Woman, but her basically, setting up her origin and stuff like that. Just use Historia. Use
Yeah.
Historia, and Historia, mix it with Perez, and honestly just follow Perez. Nothing else, because especially sure as hell not Tom King. And honestly, um the more I know about Rucka, not him either, because his whole thing with Diana is, when you read and deep dive into his run for Diana, if it's not boring, it's very much like he's trying to implement her as like this dark character, and just something that she's not, very, her temperament. And when you talk about like the warrior woman aspect and everything, and kind of like she sort of at times lack compassion and stuff, so when fans talk about fan favorite writers, the bar is very low,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's just like Rucka, he is not the champion of Wonder Woman at all. I No, he very much isn't. So I would say,
Rebirth is kind of the indicator on that.
exactly. So I would say stick with Perez, as far as you can. And Spirit of Truth, League of One, those stories, if you want to have something to adapt for DC, you Wonder Woman.
Exactly. So before we wrap up, I just want to show off. I got a Wonder Woman item in the mail that's kind of personally meaningful to me. So as you guys know, I sent away Wonder Woman 800 to be signed and graded, and it came back signed by Gal Gadot. It's graded at a nice 9.6.
Yeah, I just love your love for Wonder Woman.
Thank
Like,
you.
it's so sweet. And just the fact that you is like the number one advocate for her character.
A Super Wonder fan that's also a Snyder fan. Oh no! Don't tell Twitter. Oh no!
Right.
Well, screw you guys. Yeah, it's ultimately it's like I really don't care if people think less of me because of the media I enjoy. I really don't.
Right. Right. I mean, what really are they gonna do? Like,
Yeah.
they're hiding behind computers and acting tough. But if you were to see them on the street or whatever, I guarantee you they are the repressed chihuahuas.
God. I never. That's my favorite. Can I tell you? That's my favorite one that you do. I'm just gonna tell you that. But I think that's a good place to leave it. So, Britt, what stories do you have to tease us with?
All right, so of course we are on the chapter stories of Odyssey. Yes, Jared has, made me send a bunch of cat gifs,
Oh,
but
I got a few more.
I know. But chapter two is coming along. I have some surprises of my own, and
Ooh.
especially with also chapter four of Shelter Story One. I have a couple of one shots. I'm finishing that up to be posted within the week, and also one story that I have completed will be posted as well. So yeah, it's just all of the things that I'm backed up with of either Jared giving me ideas, and it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I need to write this down. And also I will be doing more threads on Twitter because obviously we need to have the facts like on Twitter to reference and to let it be known because a lot of people, you can have your opinion, but please do not make your opinion force it as a fact, because that's just a lot of information being misconstrued. And especially with Wonder Woman, we don't need misconstrued information for her character. We need people to understand her character and to love her character, to respect her character. Putting out your like fandom fetish type thing for her, and just so stuck on shipping, yeah, we talk about Clark and Diana's relationship, but again, we always reiterate that you can take it or take it or leave it of the romantic aspect of that. What we care about mostly, and because that is the most important foundation, is them being friends and best friends, having that solid foundation. And the romance can come later on. So for us, what's more important to us is that Diana gets the respect that she deserves. So I will be putting out a Tom King thread as well as basically, like I just said, a thread that really just in a sense what we've complained about like with the Trinity and by Trinity I mean Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, in that whole concept of how superficial it is, and things like that. That will be another thread. And just also maybe a hot takes thread or just my own opinions, but I'm also, of course, letting it be known that I will have facts within that.
Awesome. So stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lame, and Steve Trevor, Steve Never. He belongs 24 feet in the ground. Yes, every week I'm going to increase by 12. She belongs with General Zod or Satan. Either one works.
Wow.
Zoas and Max are bad for life. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.